Good morning, Facebook, YouTube, Dailymotion, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your first video blog of the day for Saturday, March 7th, 2015, around 6:49 in the morning, Belleville, Massachusetts. Nice out, but very cold, only about 10 degrees, but we're going to make a nice recovery to about 34, 35 degrees today in the Merrimack Valley. Some news to report. The Boston Celtics beat the New Orleans Pelicans by the score of 104-98 last night. And also in college hockey, for the first round of the Hockey East playoffs, the UMass Amherst Minutemen beat Notre Dame by the score of 4-3 in 5 overtimes. 5 overtimes is the longest game in Division I college hockey history, and it was a great game, probably an instant classic. And UMass Minutemen are up 1-0 in the series, and this is kind of very important because if the winner of this series faced off against UMass Lowell next week at Saugus Arena. And that's about it on that. My first video subject blog of the day is about the former WWE Tag Team Champions, the Nasty Boys, Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags. The Nasty Boys were one of the most famous tag teams in professional wrestling history. Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and they were trained to become professional wrestlers by Brad Ragans and Vern Gagne in the famous Minnesota camp that Vern Gagne had. And the Nasty Boys made their professional wrestling debut in 1985. The Nasty Boys had a unique look. They wore like leather trench coats, and also they had like the tank tops that had nasty with graffiti and stuff like that. And they also had, Knobbs and Sag had mohawk mullets, which was pretty amazing and stuff like that. And the Nasty Boys were like brawlers, like they had like kind of hardcore before hardcore. They first wrestled for the AWA, and then they went to Memphis to feud with the Midnight Rockers, and then they went to Florida Championship Wrestling, and they held the Florida Championship Wrestling tag team titles for about 5 times in 1989 and 1990. Florida Championship Wrestling happened after Championship Wrestling from Florida, so that's like a succession, like it succeeded Championship Wrestling for Florida in their Florida territory. And the Nasty Boys' first national exposure for professional wrestling was in September of 1990 when they signed a contract with WCW, and they feuded with the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott Steiner, for the WCW World United States Tag Team Championship. They had a match at Halloween Havoc 1990, but they did not sign a long-term contract with WCW. And a few months later, the WWE called the Nasty Boys up, and the Nasty Boys signed a contract with the worldwide leader in sports entertainment. And then the Nasty Boys made their WWE TV debuts at the end of 1990, and their manager was Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, and the Nasty Boys got a big push. Their favorite maneuver was like Knobbs and Knobbs or Sags coming down with an elbow, and another favorite move of theirs when they put their opponents until rub them in like the side of their arms, the armpits they called it. It was Nasty Pit or something like that, and the announcers were saying that Knobbs and Sags did not put deodorant on it. It smelled real nasty and stuff like that. The Nasties were heels, but they were getting over with the crowd. In March of 1991, the Nasty Boys beat the Hart Foundation, Bret the Hitman Hart, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart for the WWE Tag Team Championships. And for the next 5 months, the Nasty Boys were tag team champions of the WWE. They had some classic matches with the Bushwhackers and the Rockers and the Legion of Doom over the WWE tag team titles. They dropped them to the Legion of Doom at SummerSlam 1991, and the Nasty Boys continued to be with the WWE for the next year and a half, but they didn't. They were just a regular tag team. They weren't in major angles until the fall of 1992, when they were promised a WWE Tag Team title match with Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. But the Mouth of South, Jimmy Hart, also managed another tag team, Money Incorporated, and Money Incorporated jumped and ahead of the Nasty Boys for the tag team title shot against Natural Disasters, and the Nasty Boys confronted them, and ILS and $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase were going to pay him off, and Knobs and Sacks put their money in their trench coat and just start pounding away on Money Incorporated. And then Money Incorporated won the WWE Tag Team titles back from Natural Disasters, and then when Jimmy Hart and Money Inc. was celebrated on Wrestling Challenge at the broadcast booth with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon, the Nasty Boys come back and they just attack Jimmy Hart and throw him, press slam him onto ILS and $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. The Nasty Boys now were faces, which was pretty good, and they had several matches with Money Incorporated, but they were unable to take the WWE Tag Team titles. They were slated for a feud with the Head Shrinkers in March of 1993. They had a match on Raw, and it was pretty good. It was a big brawl, but the Nasty Boys left the WWE soon afterwards, and then a few months later they showed up in WCW. They were heels again. They started to feud with the Horsemen, Arn Anderson and Paul Roma, and at Fall Brawl 1993 the Nasty Boys beat Paul Roma and Arn Anderson with the WCW Tag Team titles, and they got a new manager, Missy Hyatt, but they dropped it to Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Alexander Bagwell the night before Halloween Havoc 1993 on WCW Saturday Night, but that WCW Saturday Night was taped several weeks prior, so the Nasty Boys lost him like several weeks before on a taping, but that was shown the day before Halloween Havoc 1993. The Nasty Boys regained them at Halloween Havoc 93 over Bagwell and Too Cold Scorpio, and for the next 6 months they were WCW Tag Team Champions. They were great champions. They defended it against Sting and Road Warrior Hawk at Starrcade 93. They also defended against Max Payne and Cactus Jack. They had some classic matches with Max Payne and Cactus Jack, which they had a big brawl at Spring Stampede 1994. Around this time, Missy Hyatt left WCW, so the Nasty Boys were on their own, and the Spring Stampede match between Max Payne and Cactus Jack and the Nasty Boys was like one of the top matches of the year in 1994 by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which was pretty amazing. And then the Nasty Boys eventually dropped the WCW Tag Team titles at Lamborghini 1994 in Philadelphia against Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan in another street fight. The special guest troubleshooting referee was former Philadelphia Flyer enforcer Dave Schultz, and Dave Schultz got a little physical with one of the Nasty Boys and stuff like that. Nasty Boys dropped the titles. They still continue to feud with the Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan over the WCW World Tag Team titles, and at house shows and stuff like that. Eventually the Nasty Boys turned face and feud with Pretty Wonderful Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Pretty Paul Roma over the WCW Tag Team titles, because Orndorff and Roma won them in the summer of 1994, but the Nasty Boys were unable to take the titles away. And 1994 was a great year for the Nasty Boys because they were voted Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Tag Team of the Year. In 1995, the Nasty Boys feuded with Harlem Heat over the WCW World Tag Team titles. Harlem Heat won them, but this was a months-long feud, probably one of the top feuds in 1995 in professional wrestling. The Nasty Boys and the Harlem Heat had several classic matches, including a street fight at the first uncensored WCW pay-per-view, which was named one of the top matches of 1995 by Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Nasty Boys regained the WCW World title at Slamboree 1995 over Harlem Heat, but then they had a feud with the Blue Bloods, who was Lord Steven Regal and the Earl of Eden, Bobby Eaton. But then at like the Great American Bash 95, the Nasty Boys retained the titles, but they lose them a couple of weeks later back to Harlem Heat on WCW Worldwide. And then for the next year and a half or so, the Nasty Boys are kind of like jobbing tag team. They job a lot to faces and heels and stuff like that. They had a great feud with the Public Enemy in 1996. They had some great street fights with them and stuff like that. In the fall of 1996, the Nasty Boys tried to join the NWO, which was Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and Syxx and the Giant and the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase and Vincent, who was Virgil. Hogan tries to accept them, but the rest of the NWO attacked them. But in real life, Knobbs and Sags are like good friends with Hulk Hogan. But I think they were doing this just to like build up Hogan as an evil heel. The Nasty Boys, like one of the last big WCW matches was at Starrcade 1996 when they faced off against the Outsiders, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, and the Faces of Fear, Mean and the Barbarian in triple threat match for the WCW tag team titles. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash retained the titles. And then during a house show in 1997, between the Nasty Boys and Outsiders, there was a shoot. Scott Hall legitimately injured Jerry Sags in the face, like knocked out a lot of his teeth. Jerry Sags was seriously injured. Eventually, the Nasty Boys were released from contract for WCW. Jerry Sags did not wrestle for several years, and Brian Knobbs came back to WCW. He was in the hardcore division and stuff for a few years until WCW went out of business. And the Nasty Boys came back. They wrestled in several independent shows. They even tried to get back on WWE in 2007 tryout matches, but they worked stiff, so they weren't rehired. He came back to TNA in 2010 because Hulk Hogan was in TNA at the time. Nasty Boys reunited with Jimmy Hart, and they had a brief feud with Team 3D, which is the Dudley Boys. They were only in TNA for about 2 months until TNA released them, and the Nasty Boys are still around in independent shows, and they had autograph sessions and stuff like that. And the Nasty Boys probably were the forerunners of hardcore wrestling for tag teams before ECW. I'm very surprised that the Nasty Boys did not have a run in ECW in the late 1990s after they left WCW, but like Sags was injured and stuff like that. But they would have fit good with ECW and stuff like that. And the Nasty Boys were much better heels. They were great heels, but faces didn't do it to me that much. I think it was just storyline purposes in 1992 and stuff, in like 1994 through 1996, and the Nasty Boys should be in the WWE Hall of Fame, but I don't know if they're going to be in it anytime soon. And I like this show. We're going to get nasty, and you're going to go to Nastyville, and it's one trip you're not going to come back from. And Nasty Boys were probably one of my favorite tag teams in the 1990s for professional wrestling. And that's about it on the Nasty Boys. Well, I'll be back later. Facebook friends, YouTube followers, Daily Motion, and Twitter. 2 more video blogs. First video blog will be about no-hitters and perfect games in baseball. That's kind of a rare feat. And the third and final video blog of the night will be about Doug Gilmour, former Toronto Maple Leafs captain and Hockey Hall of Famer. That's going to end the week of great Toronto Blue Jays and Toronto Maple Leafs players and pitchers. And beginning tomorrow will be the personality profiles about 7 great college basketball players and coaches or announcers. And it's going to continue. And have a good day, Facebook, YouTube, Daily Motion, and Twitter. And I'm doing more of these blogs with different faces, and I'm getting good feedback on it. So have a good day, everybody. See you tonight.